Thank you, sir. All right, it is 7 o'clock, and being at 7, we're going to open up tonight's meeting of the King George County Planning Commission for 11 October 2022. For the record, we do have a quorum present. Welcome, everybody. I would ask if you can please stand and recite with us the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Williams, would you lead us in invocation, please?
We bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that you have blessed us with, the Lord. We thank you for the protections of your loving arms have put around us, the Lord. We ask that you give us clear minds and hearts as we go about the county business and making the decisions for the citizens. The Lord, these and other blessings we pray. Amen.
Amen. Please be seated. All right. This is the part of the agenda for the evening. We will go to public comment. Rules of public comment are, please feel free to approach the podium, state your name and address, and leave your comments to 3 minutes, please. We will have a timer up. And again, we will now open up public comment. So if you have something you'd like to say, please feel free to approach. In no particular order.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Hobie Mitchell. I live at 39207 John Mosby Highway in Aldie, Virginia. I passed out several things to you. One is the text of what I'm going to say, and also a text amendment which we gave to the Board of Supervisors, which I believe they forwarded to you for consideration to the consultant to add power plants into the ordinance in the industrial district. So that was a copy of what you have. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission and staff. My name is Hobie Mitchell, lead partner in Green Energy Ventures, LLC. We are the contract purchasers of the Taylor property, 342 acres located on Route 3. We have filed a rezoning application for your consideration. We are proposing to develop the King George Technology Center, which would consist of data centers, public water treatment facility to be owned and operated by King George County, and a clean green energy hydrogen plant. Our plan is consistent with the county's comp plan and will provide tremendous economic benefits to the county residents. Our partnership team has extensive experience in large-scale development projects, which include data centers and a power plant. The build-out of King George Technology Center, we believe, would create a tax base of $3 to $4 billion for the county. You can do the math. The economic benefit of such an investment in your community would be extensive, and the additional county services that would be required to service this additional tax base is nowhere near commensurate with the economic benefits added. To create a viable data center development in today's competitive business environment, 3 elements are essential: clean, renewable energy supply, high capacity fiber, and regulatory approval. The linchpin of our development plan is a clean energy hydrogen power plant, zero carbon, little NOx. It's a new, very innovative technology, proven. In fact, we're going to set a prototype up in Northern Virginia. It will service the energy needs of our data center development and possibly adjoining properties as well, including the local network. We are working with the local utility companies in that effort. The current zoning ordinance requires connection to public or community water system if a water-based cooling system is utilized. Although recent advancement in data center designs have minimized the necessity for water-based cooling system, our hydrogen power plant will consume a large amount of that water. We believe that only the county should be in the business of supplying public users with water, which is why we're proposing to donate the land and build and finance a public water treatment facility for the county to service the needs of our project, but also the entire county and its residents. The Commonwealth of Virginia, as you know, is mandating King George County to convert current water treatment facilities from groundwater to surface water. So I think my time's up, but you can see the rest of my speech. We're here to participate and we know a lot about the data center business, have done it. power plants, and so we're here to work with the county to implement this and make it a huge economic success.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next speaker, please. Evening.
Debbie Fairfax, 623 Kings Highway. You are looking at 444 roof-mounted exhaust fans atop 4 data centers. They make a constant droning sound with both high and low frequencies, 24/7, 365. A citizen whose home abutted the Cyrus One facility in Chandler, Arizona, told me that there were folks up to 4 miles away who could hear the whir of cooling fans. In Limestone, Tennessee, the sound could be heard as far away as 5 miles and was reported at a church 1 mile away to sound like a jet plane idling on a tarmac. Obviously, those living closest, the sound was the worst. We have no idea how the sound will carry across the open fields or through the woods of our county. We have a unique situation here. Our industrial park was plopped in between homes, not secluded miles away, and we don't have numerous structures to break the sound as in a suburban area. We can't make homes unlivable. That's why we can't do a cut and paste of what some other county does. Noise restrictions need to be done for both level and frequency like Warrenton, noise studies and noise site surveys like Fauquier, requiring immersion cooling methods, limits on building sizes, limits on inside space used by servers like Loudon, standards addressing combined noise of all data centers located in proximity, like in a data center campus, regulations that mandate attenuation if noise standards are violated, penalties for noise violations such as Faukier's Section 13.5-2, hardy setbacks and buffers, especially from schools. Data centers have serious, life-altering, well-documented noise issues that cost time, money, and lots of publicity to even potentially improve after the fact. Data centers like solar farms and battery storage facilities are new to King George with unique round-the-clock operations. None of these should be by right and industrial, at least for a while. Loudon Board of Supervisors just days ago set new standards regarding proximity to residents, and additional noise guidelines may be added. We want to attract industry, and our comparatively low land prices and access to the water and the grid are enticing. You see that with what you just got presented to you. If you want to see industries in King George, then you should be the very first to want them by special exception so that you can help ensure their success, their longevity, and their neighborliness. Please ask Ms. Hall to weigh in on the following. If an applicant had an industrial zoned property and wanted to put data centers on it, the only way this would go before the Planning Commission, the public, or the board would be if any special exceptions were asked for beyond our current ordinances and community design standards. Otherwise, data centers and solar power to run them could go in under administrative review. If you see the risk to this, please send forward a recommendation to the board to pull these 3 uses out of by right tonight. We are not going to cut people coming to us by putting things by special exception. Obviously, as you've seen demonstrated just before I spoke.
Thank you, Ms. Fairfax. All right. Any further speakers?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, my name is Brent Hunsinger. I am the river steward for King George County, associated with Friends of the Rappahannock, a watershed group that seeks to protect the scenic and clean water of the Rappahannock. We appreciate the commission's thoughtful and careful deliberation regarding the future of data centers in King George County. The commission controls the timeline of this process, and we hope this is only the beginning of this conversation. Friends of the Rappahannock believes data centers should be removed from the list of permitted uses by right within industrial zoning. A site-specific approach utilizing special exception process gives the county control over any proposed projects. We're also concerned about the impacts of water consumption, which depends on the type of cooling that is utilized from data centers. The Rappahannock River will almost certainly be the source of water for any data center operation. Currently, the river is already being proposed to be the source of water for a joint permit application for Caroline County, of which King George has already signed a letter of support for that withdrawal, to bring water from that withdrawal across the county lines, across the river to here, if that joint permit application were to be accepted and a permit issued. Thank you for your consideration, and we can look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Yes, sir.
Mr. Musselman, 2216 Kings Highway. Not opposed to growth, just for the simple fact you need to for the tax base and stuff. I am opposed to the type of growth and the way it's carried out. Being a rural community, that needs to be looked at for the serenity and just for the everything that King George stands for. I've been in construction all my life. I've worked around servers, I've worked around data rooms, I've worked in clean rooms. They're very loud, they're very noisy, they're very annoying. The noise never goes away. For the amount of volume of air that needs to be moved to keep these servers cool, you can't keep it quiet. It's like Ms. Fairfax says, depending on the speed of the fan, there's different tones. Once it starts, you can't stop it. There's just, I'm not opposed to growth, but I don't think a data service center is it. So I hope you look at that.
Thank you, Mr. Musselman.
Good evening,
Who?
Denise Belmer, 9500 Warman Drive. Thank you for taking the data center conversation seriously, because it does impact the residents of our neighborhood and surrounding community where these centers could be located. As our subdivision, Warman Estates, is located on the end of the county, our voices should be heard. I'm here tonight to discuss our concerns about the noise issues surrounding data centers. In rural settings, noise travels far from the point of origin. We have been impacted in our subdivision by industrial noises since our move to this neighborhood from out of state in 2005. These noises have included the now defunct Birchwood Power Facility and the King George County landfill. I would like to reference an article that was printed in the Freelance Star on January 24th of 2016 about noise levels in our neighborhood emanating from the King George Industrial Park, with the headline of "King George County Couple Sound Off Over Ceaseless Hum." The article speaks about the numerous contacts with local officials who were receptive to their concerns, but the article acknowledges that even if there were violations of the county noise ordinance, the company causing the excessive humming isn't legally obligated to make any changes, as any noise generated from industrial activities is exempt under the ordinance passed in June of 2013. In this article, Richard Granger, who is the newly elected Board of Supervisor member whose district includes the landfill, said that he hoped the industrial noisemaker would do the right thing. "I would hope we could appeal to their sense of decency," he said. "We do have an obligation to make sure we provide the best quality of life people can have." Supervisor Jim Howard stated, "You've got 2 industrial facilities there, 3 if you count the tulip factory," he said. "I mean, you can expect noise. Suppose we find out if it's the landfill and it's an important function that they do. What are we going to do?" With a final quote being from Supervisor Granger, who said, "Or if it's someone else we haven't thought of, it's important to find the culprit." Based on this last quote, my final thoughts, based on personally being impacted by these noises, is that we need to ensure that another industry is not placed near these residential areas that impact the quality of life of its residents, their home values, and their ability to sell their homes should they no longer be able to live peacefully in them. Please, or people like ourselves, come to live in King George County for the peace and tranquility it offers in a historical country setting. Please take the data centers out of by right and safeguard your citizens by allowing these in special exception only. Thank you for your time and consideration. I do live in a very densely wooded area in Warman Estates, and every day I am bombarded with the noise of the landfill. And this is from Friday morning, if I can find it, at my driveway. I know it doesn't have quite the same
All right.
ring to it, but that's what I record every day because I hear it.
Thank
So
you, Ms.
I
Belmont.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else? Good.
My name is Todd Fairfax, 623 Kings Highway. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, first, thank you very much for making data center ordinances the agenda item tonight. We are very grateful. It's vitally important for this county to get this correct at the start before data centers arrive, rather than trying to correct serious issues after construction and operation. We visited the Great Oaks subdivision in Manassas. We stood about 800 feet from an Amazon data center campus, more than two football fields away. In between was a vegetative buffer about 450 feet of full-grown deciduous, evergreen, and understory trees with shrubs and bushes throughout. This is a sample of what is heard. Data centers, solar farms, and battery storage facilities are by right in industrial zones. These are relatively new across other localities and entirely new in King George. There's a lot more we do not know about these, many unintended consequences and citizen impacts that aren't realized until after operation begins. And those consequences and impacts are difficult to correct and take a long time to do so, even if possible. Please make data centers and the other two uses by special exception only. This will ensure applications are individually examined by staff, by the Planning Commission, and by the board, along with two public hearings to give the public's voice an opportunity to be heard and considered. Government's job is to protect the citizens. Hearing their input enables you to do that. This is imperative to make sure we make the right decisions. Noise from data centers to nearby property owners is a very serious issue being experienced now by neighbors of data centers. We do not want the same. Most noise ordinances do not specify sound levels for specific frequency bands of human hearing. Please craft our noise threshold specific to data centers to use the decibel Z as in zebra scale, with different maximum decibel levels set for day and night for human hearing octaves. Please look at section 914 of the Warrenton zoning ordinance as a great example. Please require all applicants conduct a noise modeling study in the application process and a noise site survey before operation commences. Both should be of total noise sources at the data center and at locations 6 feet or more within all adjacent and nearby residential uses to eliminate the noise impact to residents. Please add a distinction between the definition of data center and data center campus. A data center is a single building, and a data center campus is more than one data center in close proximity, irrespective of the applicant or end user. Sound is additive, so a campus will add 3 decibels of noise for each doubling of the building count. Please add a vibration ordinance to deal with the data center diesel generators that are on site as backup power. They spin up regularly for a duration as part of their maintenance cycle, and their combined use creates a regular to near constant source of ground vibration as well as noise to neighbors. Please continue this conversation beyond tonight's session.
All right. Any other speakers this evening?
My name is Rick Payne, 3456 Kings Highway. Noise seems to be the objection here, which I agree with the noise. I'm sure each of you have a heating and cooling system in your house. I'm just looking at this 444 exhaust fans to believe to be 100,000 CFM. Your house air conditioner probably averages around 1,500 CFM. And I'm sure you've probably got somebody in this room that knows what 1,500 CFM sounds like in your house. Well, just imagine what 100,000 CFM and 444 exhaust fans is going to sound like to those of us who live in close proximity to that data center. So I can't really say much more than what's already been said, except noise is the big issue, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. All right.
Mr. Chairman and board members, my name is Richard K. Payne. I live at 3524 Kings Highway, King George, Virginia. I've lived there for 67 years, and we've had a fairly peaceable, quiet neighborhood there for that period of time, with the exception of listening to gravel plants whining all night sometimes, gravel trucks running the roads, trash trucks up and down the road, the whine of the power plant that graciously fell one morning, and many other things. But living where I live and what I've heard, this data center is proposed just across the road from me. And how in the world would I ever get a night's rest? This thing whirling 24/7, it will be impossible for us to even live there. So this would probably force us out of the area in order to find a peaceful place that we might live. And I would pray and hope to goodness that you people, you commissioners, would take into consideration this. If, I'm not opposed to, I want to back up and say, I'm not opposed to development, I'm not opposed to industry, but I am strictly opposed to something like this that's going to disrupt not just me, but my neighbors and most of the western end of King George County. I would hope that you would take real deep thought, and if something like this does and will happen in this county, that you make sure that it has a back set of at least 1/2 a mile of any resident or any business or whatever it might affect. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. All right, the floor is still open if anybody else would like to speak. Hey, Mr. Marshall.
Hi, my name is Robert Marshall. I've lived in the county all my life. I don't have a speech prepared, but what I hear tonight that's already been said, I'm definitely opposed to this, what's being proposed here tonight. And my main concern is the noise. I also would be right across the road from this development. And like Mr. Payne just mentioned, how are we gonna get a good night's rest with this kind of noise? And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. All right. Anybody else? Last Nichols. All right.
Does that include the virtual people?
Anybody online, Mr. Dons?
Mr. Liver, is that you?
Yes.
Yes, please give your public comment.
All right. Thank you. I'm John Liver. I hold a doctoral degree in computational science and informatics. I live in Gainesville, Virginia, which is Prince William County. I'm also a retired NASA engineer. I have been working on the data centers here in Prince William County, and the chart that you see on the screen with the Great Oak neighborhood, I've been doing some of the analysis behind there. I applaud that your commission is actually starting to think about this now, and they want to do the process right. What is happening here in Prince William County? Data centers are noisy. They make on average 65 decibels for a 330,000 square foot building at a distance of 500 feet away, and can be heard between 2 to 4 miles away, depending on how flat your land is. And your land there in King George County, you're going to hear them for up to 4 miles. What has happened in Chandler, Arizona, if you're not familiar with that, I can send you some things. They put in data centers and never considered the noise. It drove people out. The city was sued. It cost millions of dollars to the city and lots of time. So Prince William County in 1989, they developed a noise ordinance, which was before data centers were invented at that point. And as a result, there was a lot of confusion written in on how noise should be taken, who should take noise. This needs to be in any ordinance that you do. The Prince William County ordinance is only a public safety ordinance. It's not a zoning ordinance. It's not a building ordinance. You can't do that because this relies on the police. And I don't know about your county, but in Prince William, the police are already overburdened with their regular work, let alone handling noise complaints. And so they do not include it in the rezoning, special use permit, the building permit process or anything. It is only done voluntarily. The noises, I've done some modeling of them. And with the 24/7 noise, I looked at the site that is proposed for the data centers across Bloomsbury Road. The noise will be 78.6 decibels directly across Kings Highway. The noise will be 92 decibels. 92 decibels is like you're standing very, very close to a motorcycle when he's revving his engine. That's what they're going to hear 24/7. Noise causes health effects. This increases the stress, sleeping disorders, it causes migraines. I think Dale Brown is going to talk about this a little when he talks about what is happening in his neighborhood, but we are already seeing health effects here in Prince William County. So what I'm imploring you guys on the Planning Commission to do is require a noise study to be done. Require that there are adequate limits put on the noise, less than 60 dBA or dBZ to be done. And also the last comment is that also that you have dual control over this zoning ordinance that is control. It is part of the rezoning, special use permit, building plan, as well as a public safety type ordinance. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to provide you with any further information later.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Dines, do we have anyone else online?
Yes, Mr. Brown, would you like to provide your comment?
I would. Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Dale Brown. I'm the president of the Great Oak Subdivision Homeowners Association located in Prince William County. I live at 10517 Wingdam Circle in Manassas, Virginia. Thank you again for this opportunity. I'm here tonight by invitation to share the impacts of noise emanating from the Amazon Data Center campus next to Great Oak. I will also ask that you thoughtfully and carefully consider your approach to building data centers in King George's County. Great Oak is a 30-year-old community comprised of 291 single-family homes. It was a quiet community with 3 tot lots, a tennis, pickleball court, playing field, and walking paths. A few of our homes are located within 600 feet of the data centers, and 1 tot lot is within 800 feet of the data centers. The photo you've been looking at was taken from within Great Oak via a drone, so above Great Oak, looking towards the Amazon data centers. Great Oak residents began feeling the impacts of the noise from the Amazon data centers earlier this year when 1 of the 4 buildings was operating. Today, 3 of the 4 buildings are operating on this 820,000 square foot campus, and they're fully operational. Noise levels consistently exceed 60 decibels day and night, and at times the noise exceeds 70 decibels. The noise is a continuous humming noise at an irritating frequency and a variable volume. It has resulted in numerous health issues. Many people are experiencing sleep impacts. Sleep disruption has increased their stress and anxiety levels. This irritating sound exacerbated migraine issues, and in one case is contributing to worsening symptoms for a rare autoimmune disorder. One migraine sufferer replaced every window in his home at his cost and was forced to move the nursery for their newborn to the basement to protect their infant. The father can no longer comfortably work from home due to his migraines. Another homeowner states, "I feel the vibration and noise resonating through the frame of his house." We have been in biweekly meetings with Amazon, as well as senior staff and elected officials from Prince William County since 22 July of this year. We are pressing both for changes. These 4 buildings have a total of 444 roof-mounted exhaust fans and 88 diesel generators, all creating a cacophony. Amazon has unsuccessfully applied 1-inch thick shrouds to all the fans with no change in noise level. They're working on custom-made wind bands fan replacements, fan control software changes for a permanent solution. This will take another 4 to 7 months, and by my guess, cost Amazon several $1 million. We are clearly in an uphill battle, which you have the opportunity to avoid by critically reviewing and revising all of your ordinances and policies before you approve any data center development. Prince William County relied on a 1989 noise ordinance, which was written before anyone envisioned any data centers being built here. Further, it has a nighttime cooling exception intended for residential units that the data centers are hiding behind. The adage of an ounce of prevention applies here. Please do not repeat these mistakes. I would like to invite any of you or all of you to Great Oak to come and experience this. Just you can get a hold of me through Mr. Fairfax, Mr. or Mrs. Fairfax, and I'd be happy to host you. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Dines, anyone else?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Anything to be read in, Ms. Hall? Are we good? Okay. All right. With that said, we will close public comment and we'll move on to our next order of business, which is approval of meeting minutes. We've got 2 meetings to go through this evening. The first is 9 August 2022. So as we typically do, I would ask that if anybody has any questions, comments, concerns, please note the page and we will address it accordingly. All right, if there are no concerns, nobody has any comments, I'll ask for a motion to approve the meeting minutes of 9 August 2022.
I move we approve the meetings from August 9, 2022 minutes.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. All right. On to the next one, meeting minutes from 17 August 2022. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Note on page 74 regarding the vote on 22-07-Z07 states that the motion was carried by a unanimous vote of 9 to 1 to 0. Those 2 things can't be true at the same time.
It's very true.
I guess I'd ask just to check the minute, check the audio, see what the vote was.
And I had one similar comment, although not on a vote, on page 50, under one of my ramblings. I said I would have liked, the quote is it's the last bullet, third to last bullet on page 50. In that paragraph, there's a statement about the middle of it said, I would have liked to look a bit more. I would like to add a little bit more so that we could sell it. And so I don't know if that was a incomplete thought that I had, but I don't know that first sentence makes any sense. I'd like to, if possible, go back through the audio on that before we finalize that. Otherwise, we could approve it with those recommendations. Yep. All right. Anyone make a motion that we approve with those caveats?
So moved.
Second? Second. Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you all.
I'm sorry, who's second? You did. Thank
Mr.
you.
Kendrick. All right. Next item on the agenda is Community Planning Liaison Officer, Naval Support Facility, South Potomac. Mr. Hastings, do we have you on the line?
Yes, good evening. No update tonight, thank you.
All right. Thank you, appreciate it. Next item on the agenda is plan review, which we have none. After that, we've got public hearings, which we had none. Old business, there is none. Brings us to new business, which is, as requested in our working session 2 weeks ago, the data center discussion. So We'll turn that back to Ms. Hall for her findings.
Good evening. So I believe everyone's here to discuss data centers. First, I want to apologize for not being at the last work session, but it was my understanding that you guys requested that we go back and take a second look at what we have in our current ordinance. So tonight, I envision this more of an open discussion so that we can relay back to the Berkeley Group our ideas, what we would like to see in our new ordinance, address any areas of concern, as well as review our current ordinance, our draft ordinance, and other localities, as well as key points to consider. Currently, the definition in our current ordinance for data center is a facility used primarily for the storage, management, processing, and transmission of digital data, where houses, computer and/or network equipment, systems, servers, appliances, and other associated components related to digital data operations. Such facility may also include air handlers, power generators, water cooling, storage facilities, utility substations, and other associated utility infrastructure to support sustained operations at a data center. Our current ordinance allows data centers in a commercial zoning district only by special exception, which is a public hearing process. Industrial is currently a by right administrative review. As a reminder, this means as long as they meet the minimum standards of the ordinance, Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors will not review or approve a by right plan. In section 4.17, we discuss additional requirements for data centers. For example, shall be connected to a public water system. If you remember, we discussed not wanting additional commercial wells because we had concerns about preserving our water aquifer. Generators, storage facilities, and other mechanical infrastructure shall not be visible from any adjacent street, use, or building. Generator testing shall be between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. and approval from the electric company prior to permitting. This is our draft 2023 ordinance. As you can tell, it looks much like what we currently have, with the exception of a clarification that data centers shall not establish commercial wells for any operations. So I think that we can all agree we have some work to do on our draft ordinance. Berkeley Group considered Caroline, Loudon, Fauquier, Fairfax, and Spotsylvania. Economic development-wise, this was our competition. We wanted to remain competitive while also protecting the citizens of King George County. As you can see, all of the surrounding localities have this use as a by right in some classification. Spotsy even includes data centers as a definition of office, so it is by right in commercial and industrial zoning districts. Presuming King George County wants to continue to allow data centers by right in industrial districts, the question now becomes, where do you want to set the bar? Currently, industrial zoning in King George County is primarily within the industrial park, which is under the control of King George County. As you may be aware, we have essentially run out of space in the industrial park. Therefore, any new industrial will have to go through the rezoning process. These standards will help a developer put together an application during the rezoning process that addresses the key points from a zoning and impact perspective. Some of the key points to consider with data centers is the building appearance. Typically, these buildings are large, monolithic, 1 to 2 story buildings with greater than a standard floor height of 60 to 70 feet. If aesthetic aspects are important to the community, standards addressing the exterior building facades, height, and other considerations may be warranted. So this is part of the presentation where I don't know if you want to go over each key point and your concerns individually or hold them until the end. But currently, the question is, do we want to consider building height restrictions? Do we want to also consider aesthetic appearances for data centers?
Gentlemen? I think the most preeminent issue here this evening was noise. Do we have anything?
Oh, I would definitely got noise. This is just point number 1.
So I think when we talk about height, we need to talk about setback. And that's going to have an impact upon the noise issue.
Right.
So, I mean, I saw a draft, the original draft that was provided in our package, and I didn't think the setbacks were anywhere near adequate. And I guess I'd be more inclined to do some kind of a sliding scale based on how tall the building is, or maybe the square footage of the building. You know, that the larger it is, the larger the setback from the property line needs to be. And I guess I know we have a lot of agricultural land, but, we have residences on the agricultural land near where this action is proposed. And in general, near where the current industrial park is, which I don't have a problem with enlarging it. But, if we're talking about a data center, I just want to make sure that we don't infringe upon the people who are living on their property or who have the right to live on their property in the future, that this facility is not going to be overly burdensome upon them. I'd certainly like to do or have staff or our consultant do some more research on noise levels from one of these facilities to the property line, because that's sort of my take is whatever they're doing needs to stay on their property line. Noise levels going beyond it, we could say something about current residences, but it doesn't help us any with any future residences that might show up on those properties.
Right.
Okay. So we're talking about height requirements, correct?
We're talking about height and appearance.
Okay. Noise will come later, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So can we stay on task as to with height at this point? I know one thing will affect the other, but I think we should take it one step at a time so that when we do get to the noise, then we can perhaps collectively look at it all. As to your comment on the setback, I don't think anyone on this panel is an expert on what's adequate and what's not. So if we're gonna consider that, I think maybe we should take under counsel or advisory as to what is acceptable and what is not, and what would be adequate for us. That's my comment.
I think a good starting place for that would be looking at our solar setback requirements for solar, because we spent a lot of time making sure that those sites were going to be screened from public view. I think that's a starting point. Thing with solar is that's all one level, 6 feet high, 10 feet high or so. So it really doesn't cover multi-story or extremely high structures on the site. So when Mr. Kendrick talks about a sliding scale, I'm wondering, is that a sliding scale between different zoning districts, or just a setback based on a height?
I guess I'm thinking of the industrial district is about the only place I'm seeing this kind of a facility going.
Right. The question is adjacent. Are you talking about setbacks to adjacent or industrial?
I'm saying just that facility on their industrial site, that the setback from their property line to the beginning of the building should be a product of how large that facility is. And I don't know whether it's better to do it by how tall it is or by how large it is. And again, I guess I'm coming back to the idea is that, I'm not an expert on this either, but my sense is that the larger the facility, regardless of how tall it is, the more noise that's going to come out of it. So I don't see how we can have a really good discussion about setback or the height of the building without knowing the generation of noise coming out of that building. So we're not talking about a physical feature just by itself. It's the activity going on inside it. So, I mean, I'm not sure I'm at a point, you know, when I came in here tonight, I was thinking that, you know, 3 or 4 times the height of the building should be the setback. But, yeah, I'm not sure that's adequate.
Right.
So I don't know what the adequate number is. That's the reason I'm suggesting that we use our consultants to do some more research beyond just what the, you know, other counties in the state have done with their ordinances to see what's really being recommended. I mean, there's enough data centers out there now that, you know, there's information available.
There should be plenty of data. Yeah. Moss?
Well, to throw it on top of that, the fire department, you know, they can only go so high. They don't have a ladder truck. I don't know if we want to throw that into the calculus. I hear you about the setbacks. I didn't think about that sliding scale. That's something that's interesting. I think something else we throw in the sauce is the potential for.
So I think our current ordinances limits buildings to 30 feet because that's what the fire department can access.
So we're seeing 60 and 70 feet.
Could be exceeded if an applicant came in and proffered.
And they could be
modern firefighting equipment.
They could self-insure as well, and you know.
Well, self-assuring is their business, but
right.
It wouldn't meet the county's ordinances at the moment. So. But like I said, we've had this conversation about residential, you know, multifamily residential units. The idea is that they could build higher if they were to proffer, you know, appropriate firefighting equipment. So I mean, you know, we can't ask a prospective builder to do much of anything. The proffers are their call. But should they do so, I would want to make sure that we're still far enough away and not allow that to be a loophole.
I just don't think anything towering 60 or 70 feet in the air would be appealing.
I don't know.
Mark?
I'm looking at B on here. So first of all, height, I think we have to figure out fire capabilities. And it says infrastructure necessary operations of data centers within enclosed structures screened and not visible from any adjacent street, use, or building. Screening shall comply with Article, I think that's 8, the community design standards of this ordinance. So you have a height of the building, and then you're going to have a screening above the building. It's saying enclosed, so is it saying all those fans need to be enclosed in a building? Or
I missed what you were referencing, Mr. Myers. I'm sorry.
the 2023 data center update, proposed ordinance for 2023 update?
It's on page
Okay.
2.
This one right here.
Yep, on that one. So if you're looking at B,
Mm-hmm.
it's talking about generators, water cooling systems, storage facilities, any other mechanical infrastructure necessary for the operations of data centers shall be within an enclosed structure, screened as not to be visible from any adjacent street. So are those fans considered mechanical? I don't know that you can put the fan inside.
Yes, but you could also screen them with landscaping. And I guess the question is that adequate?
But it says they're going to be in an enclosed structure.
No. I'm sorry,
Well,
Mr. Myers, what
actually,
did
the
you
way
say?
that paragraph's written, it sounds like it's talking about ancillary structures, not the data center itself, doesn't it?
Well, these are uses that go hand in hand with data centers. So, you know, with data centers come generators, water cooling systems, storage facilities, etc.
Okay.
Which is
Yeah,
also
but
later on.
the way it's written, it sounds like it's talking about ancillary structures in support of the data center. And I think what Mr. Myers is saying is we should be talking about the data center itself as well.
Okay.
So that just includes the other structures that shouldn't be visible?
No, I think this was more of a catch-all. We acknowledge that data centers come with power generators, both in the building, accessory to the building, et cetera. This was a catch-all notion there. Again, this is a draft, and this is something we're going back and looking at with a more deeper thought process.
Okay. All right. I think we should limit height somewhere just because of fire suppression, and I don't know what that limit should be right now. There's several other issues with noise and everything, but I guess we'll get to them later.
So currently, we do not have a height restriction in our current ordinance. In our draft ordinance, I believe that we discussed 50 feet. And if I remember correctly, we also discussed, should you not meet those minimum standards, you could then do the special exception process. So, for example, if they sprinkled the building or things of that nature. So there were some options built in. But I think this portion of the ordinance will speak directly to data centers and its accessory uses. So if you want specifically data centers to only be a particular height, this is where we would put it.
So I guess we need more research on the height, unless someone has a height. Right now, currently, we don't have a ladder truck to do it. If it's just height and looks, we haven't, I don't know as far as appearance if we should do anything there, but I mean, I know we're gonna screen them from the street. I would just like our solar ordinances said.
Okay.
Deborah?
Other than what's been said, I don't have any comments right now.
Paula?
Yeah, certainly noise is a big problem. I mean, all the different frequencies, but the way energy propagates is well known in general, but site specific, how will this site be affected based on terrain, tree canopy, little ravines and, things like that. So we can gather general information, but I think some sort of site specific, modeling, not infinitum, but something like that would really be helpful. But also all the other aspects of, the water consumption, certainly building height is a factor too. So I'm sure we'll stumble on more as we get through the presentation, but that's all I have for now.
Okay. Watkins, any thoughts?
Not nothing else right now. More information. Like the height, the residents for the fire department. I have a ladder truck and use their actual ladder to get on the roof in case something like that. Around
Okay. All right. Ms. Hall, feel free
Okay,
to move
so
on.
just to recap, we are certainly concerned with height, also in relation to how it correlates with noise, less concerned with appearance. Consensus?
No, I think screening is part of this conversation too.
Screening is different than the building appearance, and we have screening in this presentation too.
Okay.
So did I capture that correctly?
I think so.
Okay, all right, moving forward.
Would building
Oh.
building appearance and how you're screening, would that change noise at all on us?
I mean, noise attenuation, a byproduct of the insulation around the noise.
It was like a block building. You're gonna have different noise coming out of the building, correct?
Well, I would think that the material the building is constructed out of would have an impact of how much of the interior sound escapes to the outside. But when you're talking about, I mean, we're talking about to cool, I mean, I don't know how many of you guys have been around just a large computer room. You got really, the air changes per hour is quite high. And that's got to be exhausted somewhere. So when you're exhausting the air for the cooling purposes, you're exhausting the noise. So I'm not sure the construction material of the building really does that much for you unless there's a way to do it that I'm not aware of, which is very likely.
Okay, next up, screening of mechanical equipment and sound attenuation. These uses can typically come with visibility, aesthetic concerns, and sound and noise concerns. The screening and siting of the mechanical equipment is an important consideration for noise attenuation, especially where residential uses are nearby. Noise studies are, as part of the project design, permitting may be warranted. The question is, at this time, do we want to consider our current noise ordinance as sufficient for data centers? Does the Planning Commission want to see a noise study, sound attenuation, and other like requirements as part of their ordinance? And should we consider setbacks from residences? Homes are not the only concern when property owners wishes to enjoy their property. We should also consider farm animals, hunting, fishing, and other outdoor recreation, as we often drives a property owner to purchase a larger piece of property. A home that meets the setbacks could possibly diminish the use of the remaining property. So with that, I'll turn it over to discussion. And please make sure you speak into your mics so that we can keep all this great information.
Okay, so my assumption is that when this was written, the intent was.
This is not a part of the ordinance. This is simply an opening statement. Yeah.
So I think the frame of mind, so I won't say intent, frame of mind is like diesel generators. What was brought up today with the exhaust fans on these roofs, I don't think that was part of the concept when this was thought of. So if we're talking about just generators and other mechanical equipment, okay. Are we assuming that we're going to address the fan issue, the roof fan issue here as well?
Yes, that's part of the sound.
Okay.
So from a visual kind of a perspective, I would certainly prefer to have all the associated mechanical equipment for a data center. Generators, battery storage, whatever it is, screened by either a physical structure like a wall or vegetation. If it's a noise producer, I guess I'd prefer a wall, and then we would come back later and address what is the maximum noise level that can be heard off site through one of those.
So that's where I was going. In your mind's eye, are you seeing these screenings or the walls? Have you put yourself like next to that generator or next to that building, or are you considering yourself on the property line and not having that sight line?
I guess I'm not sure you can really separate the two, but my concern about the noise level is not for the folks that are working there. I am concerned about that, but that's not what's driving me. It's the folks who live around it, or the folks who even work around it during the day. What are they having to put up with because of this operation? And if I've read the latest version of the noise ordinance, which the one I found, I wasn't quite sure. It's set up on a day-nighttime kind of a basis. So during the day, you're allowed a certain level. Sort of understand that, although I'm sure there's folks who work nights and sleep during the days, or you've got kids, but I'm not sure for most things around the county, that kind of an approach is probably fine. It allows for recreational activities, allows for hunting, allows for, the kind of utility things that we're used to seeing. But but this operation's not gonna be, you know, a 9 to 5 kind of a deal. It's gonna be 24/7. So whatever we do, we need to limit that sound so that it's, you know, reasonable at night. And to me, the only thing I care about is how much of it escapes the edge of the property line. So some kind of a sound study, you know, probably is reasonable to require. And I'll just go on record right now as saying that I'm leaning toward the idea. Well, I'm more than leaning. I'm pretty set on it that, you know, data center, the associated things with it, solar farms, all that. I'm fine with them being in industrial zones, but by exception only, so that we have some ability to control these things. Because as we've already talked about, the site where they're located has a lot of impact upon things like noise, traffic, other things. So I'm just not sure I would ever be willing to put it into the industrial zone by right. I think that's where they belong, but I think we want to reserve the ability to review each one independently for the specifics of that activity and that site. So I'm thinking in terms of the noise to the property line, to their property line. Whatever they're willing to put up with inside their property line is their business, but when it escapes their property line, that's where I draw the line.
I'm sure that can be modeled just the way it is with lighting plans.
Yeah.
The difference is I don't think the existing ordinance is going to work. Just from what I understand it, it doesn't go by Z-weighted decibel levels. And I think what we're learning tonight is that Z-weighted decibel levels include frequencies, which is what also something that irritates people. So I don't think that's a good place to start. I think we're going to have to start fresh with requiring modeling at the proper sound levels at the property line, Z-weighted decibel levels, sound pressure levels. And I don't know that much about it. I'm going to have to do some homework myself on that. Hopefully Berkeley Group can help us with I don't know if we can cast farther and wider than Virginia on looking for ordinances, but I think maybe we ought to if we can.
There's a career field that does just that kind of stuff now.
Modeling?
Yeah, but more for these environments. It's like human impact studies. I forget the exact name of the career field, but there's one that was developed just around this human factors. That's it, human factors. So the frequencies, the dB levels, you're right. They can all be modeled.
Right.
Yeah. Just kind of go back to the discussion there. So I too consider the screening to reduce the noise, not necessarily aesthetics only. That's why I asked the question, because if people were thinking that it was aesthetics only, then I would think you could probably get that at the property line. You probably wouldn't see too much. Make them move a generator to the left, to the right, or something like that. But I think it's to help to reduce the noise.
I think the aesthetics is one
Source.
aspect of it, and for that reason,
Yeah,
I
you
would
can make it
say,
look pretty.
yeah, they should all be screened.
Hmm.
That's not the end of the discussion about the auxiliary equipment, though, because there still has to be some means to address the noise that's coming out of that equipment.
I agree with that.
Right. So if they're limited at the property line to a certain sound pressure level,
then they'll have
a special exception would permit us to see how they achieve that.
Yeah.
Whether it's by screening, walling, whatever, or setbacks. However, I think that would cut through a lot of. I think that will cut through a lot of the regulations we're trying to attach to each of these separate views just by stating a simple limit at property lines. And going back to Mr. Kendrick's first discussion, I think there should be some differentiation between an industrial zone parcel next to another industrial zone parcel versus an industrial zone parcel next to A2 or residentially zoned districts. I think that setback should be smaller between like zoned
That's reasonable.
parcels. And again, we should look at our solar ordinance for guidance on that, because we permitted no setbacks between parcels that were under the same installer of a solar farm. If I remember correctly.
So just considering noise, if you have noise and it's being generated above the tree line, you're not going to have that get dissipated. The only way it's going to dissipate is through whatever medium it's going through. So I think addressing the noise issue from the fans is more than just challenging. I don't know. I mean, that would have to be a real science on how to attenuate that noise, and I don't know. But I do agree with a noise level at the property line.
We keep getting into the noise thing, but I'll ask, is the noise because of the movement of the air or because of the construction of the fan?
Both.
If we have really good fans, are they quieter? I don't know. Can you ever mitigate it from that standpoint? Is it always going to be?
I had that same question. Lighting, for example, we know what dark sky compliant is. They have certain certifications. My question would be, is if there's a similar standard for the fans, and if so, we should have that in our ordinance. So yeah. So to recap, not to cut the rest of you guys off, before we get too far, we're absolutely interested in noise attenuation, especially at the property lines, especially of those that are not industrial adjoining property owners. With special attention to the fans, the generators, etc.
Oh, look, I might get laser eyes on this one, but I am somewhat concerned as well that if we make it too restrictive or too difficult, that we're just going to be glossed over as an opportunity to say, nope, we can go somewhere else. But I think if we can find a medium, and I'm not going to say happy medium because it might not be happy for either side, but I just want to say that I care about the noise, I really do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we just need to make sure that we're not taking ourselves out of any race before it even begins.
So to further that discussion, King George County has very little to almost no industrial land available at this point. It's all under option or it's already developed. So whomever comes in has to come in for a rezoning, red tape number 1 that comes before you. It's when you see your proffers, preferably a GDP, which is something we beefed up with our new ordinance as well. So that's layer number 1. So should you get a rezoning for a data center particularly, that would be something that with this ordinance, they put that into their application to say, we hear you, noise is a problem, and this is how we addressed it. So you have that aspect. And then currently, if you change the current ordinance, instead of it being by right, you would then have to do it by special exception, which would then make a 2-layer process that is very similar. All of those are public hearings. All of them are site specific, etc. The ordinance is where you're setting the bar. There's nothing that says they can't do more. It just says they cannot do less without coming to you. But at minimum, because we don't have industrial property available, it's more than likely going to have to be rezoned. They have to come to you and the Board of Supervisors by law already. Just keep that in mind.
So maybe, well, in my mind, a two-hoop jump is probably a jump too far for a lot of people who are ready to go. But if we have to do the rezoning anyway, and it's being rezoned for a data center, we have controls.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Heather, when we rezoned for Birchwood Power Plant,
Mhm.
that was done specifically for the power plant.
Yes.
So here's what I'm getting at is I don't want to place into the ordinances that in an industrial zone, data centers are by right, based on the idea that we don't currently have any empty industrial land available.
Mhm.
So I still want to do it by a special exception so that we'll rezone for this purpose and this purpose only. And when that purpose goes away, the rezoning reverts.
So Birchwood Power Plant property, for example, when they rezoned, they said this property will only be used as a power plant, aggregate, and one more thing which escapes me at the moment. But they said they will only be used for these things. That's why they're coming back to you through the same process to do what's called a proffer amendment. We no longer have a power plant. We now want to go back and see what else we can do with this property. So they're going back through the rezoning process, which is essentially the same, even though it's a proffer amendment. Now they could come back and say, now this is our new use and this is the only thing we're going to do. Or they could say, we just want to do what's by right and industrial or proffer down those uses. But the process is still coming to the Planning Commission for a public hearing, who then makes a recommendation to the board, who also has a public hearing and has that final decision.
Okay. So that's what I'm interested in maintaining, is that we get some oversight and some approval of what happens on an industrial site, particularly for certain type of activities that we're already sort of thinking about. Data centers, power plants, solar farms. I'm not sure what else is on that list, but there's a handful of things. So I'm just saying that we should make sure we don't do anything that lets it become by right later.
And that's something that you would do through the rezoning process. You would look at their proffers and see what it opens them up for, not just what they're applying for. So it has to be written a particular way, which you've seen. Sometimes they proffer out, we will only do these 3 things, versus we're going to not do these 5 things, but we could possibly do these other 20 things. So that's the difference of the rezoning application and possibly the outcome of that rezoning application, which is certainly at your purview.
But that gives us it allows us to maintain some control over actions as opposed to what was requested here recently of us, which is just blanket, make it industrial.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of just giving blanket industrial, do as you please, really have them proffer it down during the rezoning to say, okay, here we go.
And I believe that correct me if I'm wrong, that the proposal by Green Energy Ventures to the Board of Supervisors was to move data center in as a by right, which I'm saying I wouldn't want to see us do. So
I'm with you on not making it by right. I think though, as we redesign this, if we have non-negotiables, it's good to be clear and transparent so that if someone is coming in to get a rezoning, by special exception, these are, you have to have a sound study. You have to have so many decibels at the property line. It just makes it clear. So someone asks, they know the ask before they ask. Before they say, let's make it industrial, they know that I gotta pass these hurdles.
I
Pass those hurdles, anything else could be added in the process. I think sometimes where counties get a bad name is they're not clear and transparent in that. And then when they get there, it's like, okay, well, this is changing and they're asking for this and that, or they're not approving because they're trying to get certain things. But that adds a consistency across the board where they know if I have these things, once I get in, there isn't a whole lot else to jump through.
Agreed. So the question before us is what variables do we want to set and say, here's the line?
Yeah.
60, 70 feet. I don't have a problem with that as the height of a building. But, that we couldn't provide fire protection or rescue services to that.
Yeah, but the question.
So currently, we don't have our proposed ordinances that we're working on will establish a height of what, 50?
And that, I believe you're correct. Yes, sir, 50 feet. But currently, no, we do not have a height restriction currently, but we propose one in our draft.
So 50 would be the limit unless they can mitigate it.
I was gonna say, I think we give Chief Moody a vote there and get his opinion on where it goes. But I agree. I mean, if they've got fire suppression, then that's helping our team in the event that there's a hazard.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like an apartment building. You're not gonna have a whole bunch of people in there 24, a whole bunch of people living in there, but you are gonna have people in there working.
Exactly. I mean, it's a completely different thing. I mean, that 50, 60 feet in an industrial building would probably not be occupied space. It would probably be mechanical space or open air space. So do we really need that limit on a building like that? And again, I don't want to start getting into building codes.
So my guess is these things require pretty much nonstop maintenance. So you're going to have people in the building around the clock. So you want to make sure that they're protected. I'm fine with saying 50 feet, which is what under our proposed ordinances is what the limit is going to be. And they can exceed that if they tell us what they're going to do to provide that protection. Now, my associated thing with that is that I don't care if it goes to 60 or 70 feet tall, if they provide some protection for people inside the building, but at the same time, set back from the property line, both for visibility and to help with the sound issue, is something that I would put in there with it. Either some multiple of the height of the building or some multiple of some formula for the square foot of the building or something. Now, obviously I'm thinking about noise again, but it could be anything. From a strictly aesthetic standpoint, the bigger it is, the farther I would like it away from the property line. Just because you can put up vegetation along your property line and your sight line to something 300 feet away probably hides it pretty well. But if you allow them to put it up 50 feet away, you're going to have some big vegetation right on your property line. So I would like to keep the massive size of these structures sort of unobtrusive as much as possible, but they're going to be big. We sort of already know that. So having them farther away from the property line just makes them less intrusive.
Additional thoughts, gentlemen?
All right, moving on. Next up is energy needs. Backup energy needs. These have significant energy needs and may involve additional electrical utility infrastructure such as substations, transmission lines, or requiring upgrading existing infrastructure. It may be that energy production generation uses are proposed or cited in concert with data center facilities. Backup energy is a critical need with the use of generators and fuel storage. Currently, the ordinance only requires the approval from the electrical purveyor. We do not have a requirement that the electrical infrastructure be identified and addressed during the rezoning process. Therefore, the location of utility infrastructure, the county has limited input during the site plan review. Additionally, backup energy such as generators are in section 4.17 of simply not being visible. So, how do you feel about that?
Your proposed ordinance already has operation hours between 9 and 5 for a generator, correct?
Yes. But it does not speak to transmission lines, substations, etc., other than requiring Dominion Electric to approve it, whomever the electrical purveyor is.
So how's it work when you want to put in a high voltage line and connect to the grid, but you need to run it over other people's property?
That is typically through the electric company and their easements.
And they'll have a
So
big transformer with
utilities such as electrical to your home is not reviewed locally.
Yeah, if they're going to bring in a lot of power substation, they're going to have a big transformer or a few of them with a constant hum.
I just know that from a residential perspective, you don't like being around, overhead high voltage lines simply because, people are concerned about them and they sort of make a noise, just the electricity running through them. So,
And I'd say the transformer hum would dissipate in a much shorter distance than the fan noise, but
yeah, so that may be
but if you screened it best you could,
both the buildings away from the property line and the auxiliary facilities around it, including a substation or something, were away from the property line, that would be enough.
What I know, what I've seen is the substations are usually almost dead on the property line. They're trying to get it out of the way. Or on that setback line. Exactly.
And most substations aren't screened. There's just a fence around it.
And that's just for safety. Use the microphone.
So what I'm hearing is you wanted them to be screened. You want them to have setbacks. Correct?
I guess I'm leaning towards the idea that if you're going to have whatever the facility is, all of your associated equipment should meet the same setback requirements as your basic structure. So yeah, if your building has to be 300 feet off the property line and you're putting in a substation to feed power to it, then that should probably be 300 feet off the property line as well. And particularly if we're talking about data centers, right? Correct me if I'm wrong here. My assumption is that they're bringing in power to support themselves. It's not like I'm impacting the grid for everybody else. Now, when we start adding in generation stations as part of it and they start wanting to sell off their excess, then that's another issue. But
then it's no longer an accessory use, it's a primary use. Because your primary use would be the selling of that power, which would be a power plant.
And also, I should say that I did assume a substation. It very well could be that the power line comes in. They've got transformers that are not huge. They're just bolted to the wall or bolted to the floor inside, and they go into different panels. That too is a fair assumption. But I did assume a large substation on property when I made my comments.
I mean, the more power, the larger the substation, I'm sure. Anybody else? Okay. Next up is lighting. These uses will have security lighting needs. Light pollution and dark sky compliance may need to be addressed. As industrial possibly creeps further into the agricultural zoning districts through the rezoning process, light pollution should be a concern. Currently, the ordinance says that all commercial lights shall be dark sky compliant, which means the light fixtures shall be shielded downwards. However, if the light is 50 feet or more in the air, is that dark sky light fixture sufficient? Should an illumination plan with a maximum foot candle at a setback be considered, or some other method to ensure prevention of light pollution?
I like lighting plan, 0.5 foot candles at the property line like we already have.
I second.
All right. I don't hear anybody else. I'm going to move to the next. Next is fencing. Similar to lighting, security needs will likely require fencing to ensure the site, depending on the site conditions, consider impacts to the natural and wildlife resources. Should the fencing standard be developed, height, appearance, wildlife considerations, and security, etc., should be taken into consideration. For example, they could use 10-foot chain link fence with barbed wire around the top, or they could use aesthetically more pleasing wrought iron fence type style. They could use vinyl board on board. You know, what would you like to see with an industrial use such as data centers?
I imagine their primary use would be security. We would want to mitigate how ugly it could actually be while they're providing security, right?
Not me, Mr.
Require a 20-foot high fence. And that's again a function of setbacks too. If it,
My mind's eye, I'm thinking a 20-foot chain link fence, but if it's visible from anywhere on the property line, they weave in, you know,
My thought is, I go back to
plastic slats.
back to the power plant. I mean, it had a secure fence around it, correct? And I think it was chain link. So unless you paid attention to it, you really didn't pay attention to it.
Well, I wasn't on Route 3.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be the same fencing on all 4+ sides of the property line. You could differentiate, you know, the public facing, the road facing versus adjoining other industrial uses versus adjoining other agricultural or residential type uses. You could have the combination of fencing and landscaping. You have a lot of options here.
Yeah, view sheds on primary roads.
View sheds on primary roads. Okay. In that view shed, what would you like to see?
Preferably, I think landscape screening.
Okay. In addition to the fencing, but as far as the fencing type particularly is less of a concern as long as it is shielded from view.
Correct. Shielded from view. I don't care what it is as long as we don't have to see it.
And that's a consensus across the board?
I would back up one step saying that as long as they try to make it aesthetically pleasing.
Well, the problem with aesthetically pleasing is it's in the eye of the beholder. So
Right.
we have to be a little bit more specific as far as the material type. So you can identify the material type, the height, the setback, the landscaping that's required in association with the.
I'm just thinking from a security perspective. They've got to build a tall fence. Trying to get that, screened could be a real problem. But again, this is all assumptions in my mind's eye.
They're gonna do it. They're gonna make the site secure.
Yes.
So I think what we're looking at is
We can't hear you, Mr. DeVries. Secrets don't make friends.
So yeah, security fence is gonna be there. And that's,
so we're trying to mitigate.
So,
Exactly.
So we don't want it to look like a correctional system. Okay, there you go. So don't make it look like a correctional.
That's very specific.
if we rezone it to allow it to happen, it's gonna be an industrial site. So I don't have a problem with the type of fence. I would like a vegetated buffer, at least on the primary roads. I guess from a visibility thing, there's two things going on in my mind. It's right on 3. So everybody who goes back and forth, and that's a hell of a lot of traffic, is going to be seeing it. And then the residents who live adjacent to it are going to see it.
well, there's potential that the fence is encountered further into the property. They could have to where the fence isn't even visible from the road.
If it's farther into the property, it's less concern to me.
I agree.
So I think that we are also thinking in our minds that this is going to be right on Route 3. Not every data center that ever comes to King George County is going to be on Route 3. So is the primary 3 and 301, just like our highway overlay corridor district, your concerns with that view set shed, or is it from any public right of way?
I'd hate to go that far, any public right of way. Can we put a marker somewhere on distributor or?
Do you mean primary and secondary?
Arterial road?
For the different levels of
VDOT
roads
size.
has different level of screening. We can do that. Okay. Everybody in agreement?
Second.
Getting easier the further we go along. All right. Cooling needs, water usage. These uses have significant cooling needs, which are usually addressed through liquid cooling. Using water, consideration should be given to the source of the water if there is a need for cooling, as well as the treatment and release of water that has been used for cooling. Where is the water coming from? We've made the provision not from a commercial well, but a public water source. Is that sufficient? And we did not consider what happens to the water after it's used to cool the building. Should this also be a standard?
Yeah. I'm curious, so one of the things that makes the property along 301 there, or along 3 there, attractive is that there's already an intake from the Rappahannock, permitted and allowed.
Correct.
All right.
Well,
Maybe
I'm
not
sure that
accessible to
that
every piece of
permit
property.
has parameters through the DEQ permitting process. But yes, you are correct.
All right. So I agree. I certainly concur with the idea of not tapping the aquifer any more than we already are.
Okay.
But I guess the primary thought for me was, if you're using it for cooling, you're taking the heat away from the machines and putting it into your medium, which is the water. So what do you do with that heated water? From an environmental standpoint, there's got to be some requirements. I just don't know what they are.
Okay.
I don't have a clue what they are. I mean, does the water, if they do draw it from the Rappahannock, does it have to be desalinated? What happens to the evaporation ponds, the soils in the evaporation pond? I don't have a clue. I don't know where to start with this.
We will task Berkeley Group to find out. All right. Along with
But
all
it
the other
does,
things,
does it go into cooling ponds?
I believe it does, that there is a treatment before it goes out into the river. But exactly what that is something that we should, one, create a standard and know upfront what it would be.
And there must be
consist of.
some regulations on the temperature difference of the water with
Yes.
the body it's going back into, right?
I'm sure it's heavily regulated through their permit, their VSMP permit. Yeah. But we should certainly educate ourselves and know what that is. We can certainly do that. All right. Traffic impacts. Beyond construction impacts, once in operation, data centers have minimal employees and minimal traffic impacts. However, trips are lower than an office in typical industrial uses. While traffic is typically a concern during construction for data centers, should we consider additional constraints to the construction traffic impacts, hours of truck traffic, truck routes on rural narrow roads and intersections? So keeping in mind that data centers are a 24/7 operation. So I am sure even during the construction process, they may not necessarily want to go home during normal work hours. So is that a concern to the commission?
For me, it'd be case by case, depending on where the site is, what primary roads are around, what secondary roads are around, what residential is around. So to me, it'd be case by case.
During that case by case, did you want them to provide you truck route trips, locations, things like that? It's a study that you would like to have them provide.
Yep, just their
Is that what you
thoughts
mean?
and feelings and how they think they'd move around.
Okay.
I think I'd like to have the study. I'd like to know, depending on how big it is, how many vehicles are coming and going. Not during the construction period. I understand that's unusually high, but in normal operation, how many trips in and out? And I would want to know where they're coming in and out from. If it's coming in directly off of 3, that's certainly of concern. But if they're coming in off of how many roads are back in that whole general area that they could come off of? I want to know how much traffic is on a road that's servicing these other sites that are non-industrial, and what impact it's having to them.
So your concerns are the road infrastructure that they're connecting to other industrial uses that could pass through their property to get onto the road?
Not particularly. I mean,
Okay.
I'm thinking right now the industrial park, you don't access it directly off of 3.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the names or numbers of the roads.
Bloomsbury and is that Fletcher?
Yeah, I don't remember,
Anyway,
but there's 2 basic ways back to the basic industrial park. So, I mean, I go back there occasionally, but I don't notice a whole lot of traffic, but I don't really know what it is. I just like to know where they're planning on accessing their site and the number of trips that we could anticipate coming in and out in a normal day.
So trips per day would still be calculated as a typical commercial site plan through the VDOT review process. I think what I was trying to shed light on, or at least I was trying to, was above and beyond a typical site plan. What additional concerns would we have from a data center as far as traffic?
My perception is that there's not that much traffic coming and going just for normal operations.
Mm-hmm.
People who operate it, there's people who do maintenance on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but I don't perceive that that's a large number of people.
It's not.
But if somebody comes through here with a proposal for a huge site, I guess we could do that later, though, through the exception process, right?
Well, I think what we're trying to do is create that bar, that standard of when they come to you with their application or meeting those minimum requirements, what do you want to see from them? What are your concerns? Are you concerned about their regular everyday traffic? Are you concerned about their construction traffic? Because we're talking about very large buildings. Those buildings are going to take sometimes months and years to construct, especially once they complete one and move on to the next, presumably. So
So it's a lot of traffic for a short defined period of time, but that goes with any kind of a construction effort. I guess I'm thinking, I'm sort of accepting that in my mind, but I'm looking at once it reaches normal operations, what should we be able to expect out of it? Now, will we get that just through what they have to do for the highway department?
yes, that is through their vehicle trips per day that they have to provide through their engineering services through site plan review.
And we'd see that in the GDP, so we would know if it was going to be a campus or not at that point, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So the question is, do we need more than what they would show VDOT on a GDP?
Right. So do you want to see a traffic impact analysis knowing that they don't have a whole lot of continual, permanent, long-term traffic? Because your concerns are the campus styles. And you can make that twofold. You can have it per one building up to a certain square footage. 2 or 3 to 5, 10 employees may not be concerning, but a campus of millions of square feet certainly would be different in my mind. So we want to have a threshold for the campus, per the square footage, something of that nature.
I'd hate to say, I mean, I would hate to put a marker down and say, no, VDOT's requirements would be sufficient. It would just illustrate my lack of imagination, wouldn't it? It would. I don't know how bad it could be.
I have a terrible tendency to underestimate things, including impacts.
I think it's just the opposite, Mr. Kendrick.
You're saying I go overboard?
Oh, no. Don't twist my words.
I guess when we started this discussion about a data center, I guess in my mind, I was thinking, 2, 3, 4 buildings sort of staged in over time. But, it's an attractive site. If we just kept rezoning land to industrial, I don't know how big one of these things could get. So.
Okay, so we will send that back to the Berkeley team to say, smaller, not as much of a concern. I'm not saying it's not a concern, but the larger it is, the more traffic impacts we are concerned about.
I like the idea of having something that gives an indication to us what they think full build out is in 10, 15, 20 years, not 18 months after they start construction.
Right. And then also keep in mind, again, not everything's going to be on Route 3. So you have to plan for not just one project, but any project or any property that could come forward. So we'll take that back to Berkeley Group, see what they come up with as far as a draft. Sound good? All right, moving forward. Buffers and landscaping. Screening should be relied upon to address aesthetics, noise, and lighting concerns. Should we revisit the buffer requirements, and what should an industrial setback buffer look like? And what should it address? Should it differentiate between primary routes and secondary roads? Which I feel we kind of already touched on, but I have a slide dedicated to it. So, last call.
It's pretty good.
All right. So one of the other things we wanted to talk about is accessory uses. So we've already kind of shed light that it's not just the data centers, but all the things that come with data centers. So currently accessory use or structure is a subordinate building, the use of land, structure, or portion of the main building, or which is clearly incidental or customarily found in connection with and located on the same lot as the main building or use. Additionally, in 4.12, industrial zoning with accessory uses specifically says facilities and structures necessary for the rendering utility services, including poles, wires, transformers, telephone booths. I don't think we're getting any of those. And like for normal electrical power distribution, communication services, and pipelines or conduits for gas, sewer, or water service. So that being said, I think we need to have the discussion of accessory uses and their associated impacts. Specifically battery storage, generators, substations, transformer lines, solar panels, the rooftops panels versus solar fields. So for example, I could do possibly a 2 million square foot data center and 1 million square feet of solar as an accessory use. Is that something that you have considered? As same thing with battery storage, generators, substations. I think that this is a more large scale than what we would traditionally think when you think about accessory uses.
I've been hearing about battery storage for a while now. What is the issue that we would address that isn't already addressed by DEQ or some other agency?
I think the threshold of accessory versus primary.
Right.
Sorry. I think when we brought forth the battery storage ordinance, we thought that as more of a primary use. But data centers could have them as accessory uses, and those accessory uses are not a building of battery storage or a Connex box size battery storage. They could often be multiple, even hundreds, maybe even thousands, depending on how large these facilities could get. Same thing with generators, same thing with solar. So,
To a point where you could just say they're dual use. You couldn't even say one is primary and one is secondary.
not if,
Don't you think?
well, it could be an argument either way, which we don't want to argue. We want it to be clear, right? We also acknowledge that the bigger the data center, the bigger the accessory use.
The battery storage in the case of a data center is for emergency backup.
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay, so that's an auxiliary function of the facility.
Hmm.
Solar panels or a solar farm is a generation thing. That's not necessarily an auxiliary use. That's, in my mind, a primary use.
Not if it is to serve the data center. So
Moment they sell any of it back to the grid,
then that's different. Yes, that we agree on. But if my solar panels are to serve my data center, and again, I've got 5 million square feet of data center and I have 2 million square feet of solar panels, I can make the argument that those are my solar panels serving my data center.
Or charging your backup batteries.
The same as backup batteries, yes. They all work together.
so if they rolled in as part of the original application and told us they were putting in so many solar panels for those purposes, then we would see it. My concern is what happens later when they go, why don't we triple that number? They would be able to do it by right, or they would have to come back to us.
That is the question. How do you want it to be done?
If it's not on the original development plan, I would say I would want to have some say in it. So I'm struggling with the idea of, as representatives of the county government, how much can we intrude into the operation of a business legitimately?
I think you can intrude as much as it impacts your locality. Of course, given the confines of the law.
It's not on the original development plan. Expansion comes back before this body.
Yeah.
So I think what we're hearing is that we want them to be upfront with their plans to show the magnitude of all of these types of accessory uses for them to be permitted as accessory uses at time of rezoning.
I think just like we've said on here, we want to be transparent in our requirements without telling them how to do it. I expect the applicant to be transparent with us what their future plans are when they're known.
Okay. Is there any special setbacks or conditions that you would wish to put upon these specific accessory uses?
Whatever the building setback is from the property line, I would think these things should be within that setback,
Okay.
right? Solar farms, we're going to have something that addresses those in general, so I think we're probably pretty safe there.
Mm-hmm. The right side's being way too quiet over here.
Yeah, I'm not trying to dominate.
And again, we're not going to have all the answers. We're not going to make all the finalized decisions tonight. This is just the beginning or the re-beginning of this conversation to address some of the concerns so that we can give Berkeley Group some direction. So we're concerned about this. We want to see it up front. We want them to show setbacks. And it must be accessory, solely accessory. Not solar accessory, solely accessory. Good, moving forward. All right. You died on me. Next. Okay. That is all I have keyed up for you, but I thought I would open up this as a point of time. If there was anything I didn't think of or didn't bring that you didn't get a chance to discuss that is concerning to you about data centers.
So the thing that's popped up here lately, it's not officially in front of us yet though, is hydrogen generation. I hadn't even heard of it. That tells you how out of the loop I am, but could your consultant give us a little bit of information about the pros and cons of that?
Yes.
Been online looking, but the only thing I see are put out by advocacy groups that I don't necessarily trust. So
part of the board's discussion, as Mr. Mitchell alluded to, was that the board has directed Berkeley Group to look into it, consider it in our new ordinance. So that is something that will be discussed. But we're gonna slay this dragon first, okay?
I'd be happy to wait for the normal course of that ordinance review before we talk about that.
That was the direction that
I
the
don't want to
board.
talk about it tonight at all.
Okay. The board did make that direction that they were not interested in doing the text amendment before we finish our 2023 ordinance.
That's in keeping with any new text amendments until we complete.
Yes.
Correct?
And it wasn't just hydrogen or a power plant. It was kind of across the board. Let the Planning Commission and staff and Berkeley Group do their due diligence and get it all cohesive in one ordinance and not piecemeal it before we're even finished with it. So I think that was pretty supportive.
So summarizing, there's a lot we need to seek to understand. We're going back to the Berkeley Group for some clarity on some of these issues. Kind of putting a bow or a bumper sticker on this discussion. Is there anything that anybody wants to make from a motion standpoint, or are we going to move forward with it with waiting for seek for more information?
Well, I did have one other point. I think we should probably broaden our horizons and look at other regions that have like had huge growth of data centers and maybe learn from them what they've learned the hard way,
Okay.
at the cost of the citizens. Because we don't even know what we don't know, right?
Right.
So, the Loudons, the areas across the country that have had huge, groves of data centers.
Okay.
Because I'm sure there's things that we just don't even have a clue about.
So I'll ask again, are we done, or does anybody want to make a motion? Or are we going to wait? Are we going to move forward? Just going to wait for information to come back.
Oh, wait. There was something that I think we've muddled. Special exception versus by right. What's the consensus? Do we keep it by right with the understanding of the rezoning process, or do we move it back, not back, but do we move it as not only a rezoning, but as well as a special exception? Or you also have your third option. You set that bar, and if they don't meet that bar of minimum standards, then they have the process of going through the special exception. That I do need some concise decision.
Yeah.
So, but then don't.
I would.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I would think due to the noise issue. I think when that by right was put in there was nothing known about the noise part of it
There.
from us. I mean, that was a 3 year ago discussion, 3 year ago plus discussion that I don't think anyone knew the impacts fully. So I think going special exception is the way.
Now, is that special exception no matter the size, whether it's a singular building or a campus style, or I mean, there's a couple different ways we can slice it, or is it across the board?
Yeah, I'd say no by right anywhere.
Okay.
Is that what we're saying?
Well, so hold on. Let's go back a little bit though. We've got by right industrial for solar, right?
Yes.
All this kind of tangled together. Do we want to?
Yeah.
Does other things. I mean, do we want to revisit all of these at one time, or?
So I think when we made the decision, just to recap, to move a lot of the by right uses as a administrative review process was because our only industrial was in the industrial park. We set the standards, we knew where it was going, we knew how it would affect the neighbors majority of the way. Now we acknowledge that we're going to have to move outside the confines of the industrial park because we're simply out of space. So that leaves us a chicken and the egg kind of situation.
Yeah, and that's where I am. I really do think that we're going to take ourselves out of the running for opportunities if there's too many hoops to jump through. I think if we have to go through the rezoning process and we can have the things proffered out, proffered down, nailed down, tell us directly, we make that part of, hey, you got to tell us exactly where you're going with this as part of the rezoning. And then if we do special exception on top of that, sorry, I just think that if I were a large entity, I want to move. I don't want to have holdups that are redundant.
I don't disagree with you that we don't want to make the ability to attract businesses any more difficult than we have to, but I think there's still a lot of questions about a data center or hydrogen generation or, a lot of these things that I don't think we're smart enough to even know what all the questions are yet. So yeah, 5 years from now, maybe we go back and readdress it and say, yeah, they're fine. We got a handle on it now. They can be by right because we put in standards that we're pretty sure cover us. But I'm not comfortable that we're there yet. So I'm still leaning towards centers by exception
We wouldn't have by right though if they came for rezoning and then they proffered down to exactly what the use is. That's just eliminating the by right.
I just don't think data centers should be by right.
No, I don't either. I think we're just a little too cramped for that. I mean, you can't put a data center 50 miles away from anything and everybody in King George County. I think it should be special exceptions, so public hearings are required and the neighbors have a voice.
So I'm hearing like 50-50 at the moment, so.
Watkins, what do you think?
I'm thinking maybe go by size. You know, if they want to put 1 or 2 buildings in, you know, we can proffer down and get the zoning and get exactly what they're doing. But if they want to expand out from that, I don't know, you're kind of half and half there again. You know, you can't say, yeah, you can put in, you know, 4 buildings, but if you want to put a 5th one in, special exemption for a 5th building. So I see both sides of it. You know, you don't want to put too many hoops in where the company's going to say, nah, we can go down to Westmoreland and they don't care what we put in. We're just going to go down the road, and we've lost out on millions or billions of dollars coming into the county. There again, we don't want to say, yeah, just come build what you want as long as it meets A, B, and C. And then 2 years down the road, oh, we didn't know about D and E, and here we are again talking about it again. I guess maybe see a better definition of data centers than a data campus. I mean, is a campus the ones that are millions of square feet, or a couple 100,000 square feet, you know? Or is it just what are the actual sizes of them and all that stuff? I mean, I've never been by one, never driven by one. I was trying to stay out of Northern Virginia as much as I can. Not because of these, just because of the traffic. So I don't know yet. I mean, it's maybe if we can get more information from the Berkeley Group on what their parameters are and what the get like an outside opinion on it too from other counties, seeing what they've done. So that's all I can say.
Thank you, sir. Noah?
I thought I already said it, but I would lean towards special exception, but, you know, more information needed, right? There's a lot we don't know.
Yep. Gabbro?
I'm still leaning towards special exception. I mean, I can see things in the future where a land is rezoned industrial and then it changes property owners, and now they can by right build a data center where maybe we don't want a data center. So I'm still leaning towards special exception with data centers in particular.
Thank you, sir.
I somewhat think we need more information, but I'm special exception. I would like to try to develop some kind of framework. So if we say yes, that kind of is our framework on noise study, noise at the property line, screening, building height. If we can pick 4 or 5 things that are the parameters, that way, if we say yes, they know what those are. We're not working back through that and missing a good project because they don't know what to put in their proposal. I mean, it puts clear direction in their proposal that this is what you need. So when they come for a special exception, it's already there.
Yeah, I think just like the power plant, they rezoned, they proffered down to a specific use. Power plant's not there anymore. They have to rezone. I am genuinely concerned that we're going to put too many hoops in. So if there's a way to control it with fewer hurdles to the prospective company, not slighting the county and how we want to approach things. So if there's middle ground, I'd definitely like to understand it.
So just thinking out loud here, I think overall the concern is the lack of control. And I think we've seen that kind of with the very minimal standards for a rezoning application. So you can control the rezoning application minimum application requirements, very similar to the things that you would look for in a special exception at the same time, two birds, one stone. And I'm not trying to sway you one way or the other, just thinking out loud here. So you can make those minimum applicable standards so that the days of blanket rezonings are out the window. We're no longer accepting that. We want to know what you're doing, how you're doing it, and who you're going to affect when you do it. So I think if we can come back with some options of what that could look like, that maybe we could explore that option or explore the special exception option. I think we're overall a little still undecided and still concerned. Is that fair?
I do want to address Mr. Moss's point. I mean, I don't want to be that restrictive to scare anybody off either, but look at what the experience we've been having. We're getting these blanket requests brought to us by attorneys. I want the industry to know that we are approachable and can be negotiated with, and we'll talk about these things. Without going so far that we're just getting what we've been getting. You know, come sell it to the community. Don't send your attorney to do it. You know, that's the message I would like to find a way to send.
And if I remember correctly, I think one of the requirements in the new rezoning process is community outreach. I think that will be not only do the community outreach, but listen to what you're seeing from the community and hearing from the community as well. So I think another look at the rezoning process, especially to a high density such as industrial, is warranted.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
You know, and if there's an easier way to streamline something, we're all for it. We don't have that right now.
Okay. All right.
I think we.
Is it me?
Turn his mic off.
More information, absolutely, we need it.
Mm-hmm.
If we could get sort of the standards that we're looking to be met for a data center, maybe I could be convinced that we could do it by right with certain parameters. But right now I'm saying by exception.
I think you need it twofold. I think you need to set the standards for data centers and then additionally set the standards for rezoning and industrial. Okay.
All right.
All right.
We've got a way forward there. All right. Are we? Yeah, I know. Do we feel like we've satisfactorily discussed this issue, fellas? Okay. All right. With that, I'm going to move on to the director's report.
I'm going to kind of breeze through the director's report. I know that we did a lot of chit-chatting this afternoon. Unicity 5, which is our new permitting software, went live the end of August. We are in the process of learning our new system, working on the kinks, and then we will soon be moving into that public-facing portal. So good news there. We did 8 single-family dwellings last month and a total of 91 permits. August revenue of $40,383 for a fiscal year to date of $166,539. New projects that we have, in addition to the Birchwood project, is also Green Energy Ventures rezoning application, which is currently under review. That's all I have as far as director's report.
Do we know when any of those will come for public hearing?
At this time, Green Energy is working on their application. They're not ready for the public hearing process. Birchwood Power Facility is currently working on their resubmittal. I think that their goal is to be seen and heard in November, but that is not 100% yet.
Yeah.
So speaking of November, the next item is the November meeting date falls on Election Day. So this room will be occupied and we have to move. Given the fact that we are possibly going to have a large rezoning, I think it would be best to move the date and retain the boardroom. And the staff and Berkeley Group would like to see how Monday, the 14th of November would work for your schedules
In this room.
in this room.
I don't want to have a repeat of the firehouse incident.
I don't either.
Gym. The gym. No, I don't want to do the gym either.
Well, school's back in session. I'm not sure that that's
Oh, that's right.
a place that we can have. That was a COVID special you had at the gym, at the auditorium.
School board.
Hmm?
School board.
I think the school board meets in here. Oh, the school board building? Absolutely not. So the 14th of November, how does that work for you guys?
Good on me. Is it work for y'all? Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
We don't need to vote on that, right? We can just.
You do need to adjourn to the 14th of November when you are ready, sir.
Oh, okay. All right.
Not rushing you or anything.
Oh, that's good. All right. So there's no other business. I'll make a motion that we adjourn, or I'll ask for a motion that we adjourn until the 14th of November.
I move that we adjourn until the 14th of November.
Motion's made.
At 7 p.m. in the boardroom.
At
Yeah, I'm in the boardroom.
7 p.m. boardroom. Motion's made. Seconded. Somebody, I think. There we go. All in favor. And we call it a night. Thank you all.
Thank you.